My belongings were packed on the porch with a note. Thanks for everything, but we need the space. I read it twice, then called my lawyer. Ma, just take your junk and go. We need the space for the nursery. You're not contributing anyway. That was what she said. No hesitation, no shame, just those words thrown at me like a sack of old clothes. I had just come out of the laundry room, folding towels still warm from the dryer. I could still hear the soft hum of the machine, the scent of fresh linen clinging to my palms. That scent mixed with the burn of her words. And for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My name is Dorothy. I am 69 years old. I have one son, one daughter-in-law, one grandson who calls me grandma only when someone reminds him, and a husband who left me 3 years ago, left this world not by choice but by cancer. Before he passed, he held my hand and said, Dot, whatever happens, don't ever let them treat you like you don't matter. I said, I wouldn't. I meant it then. But some things in life, some truths, you only see clearly when it's far too late. I used to own a small grocery store down in Austin, a humble little place where I sold more handshakes than canned goods, where folks came not just to buy, but to sit a while and talk. That store kept my family afloat. When my son was in college, it was how we survived my husband's illness, and it was mine. 4 years ago, I sold it. My son had come to me tired, anxious, shoulders heavy with bills and a failing job. His wife had lost hers too. They were drowning in debt. Their house was in bad shape, barely livable for a child, let alone a growing family. So, I did what any mother would do. I sold the store. I gave him nearly everything. Every check, every bond, every dollar I had saved for my retirement, my golden years. He said, "Thank you." She didn't. I moved into their guest room. Not that I asked to. They said it was temporary. Just until things got better. Just until they got back on their feet. Just until became 4 years. In those years, I cooked every meal, cleaned every floor, picked up their boy from school, nursed his fever when they had Zoom meetings, washed every bib, paid for more than a few grocery runs. Not that they noticed, and still, I was never a part of the home. I remember one afternoon I was making my late husband's beef stew recipe. My fingers still knew how to chop the carrots just right, how to stir the pot without letting it burn. I was humming when she walked in, nose scrunched like I had spilled sewage on the stove. "It smells like arthritis cream in here," she muttered, not even looking at me. She didn't like old people food, said it lingered in the curtains, started lighting scented candles around the kitchen like I was a contagion. Lavender, eucalyptus, things that burned my eyes but not hers. I said nothing. Then there was the time her friends came over. I had just brought in fresh lemonade from the porch when she turned and with a bright laugh said, "That's just my husband's mother. She's staying with us for now." As if I were some stray, she pied, as if this weren't the same house I helped pay for, the same boy I raised from scraped knees to neckties. But I said nothing. It chipped away at me slowly, like water over stone. Little remarks, quick glances. The door that accidentally got locked when I was out on a walk. The gifts that never included my name. The Christmas photo I wasn't in because it was just a couple's shot. "Ma, don't take it personally." I told myself it was just stress, that pregnancy hormones made her short-tempered, that my son didn't mean to forget me when he booked their family vacation last spring. Family meaning only them and the boy, of course. Then one evening, I passed by her office. She was on the phone laughing. "Once we kick her out, we'll finally make this house ours," she said with a giggle so cruel it made me dizzy. I stood outside the door for a long time, wondering if maybe I had misheard, if she was talking about someone else. But deep down I knew she was talking about me, and still I said nothing because I thought if I just stayed quiet, if I just kept helping, if I just didn't make waves, they'd remember who I was. They'd see the woman who had sacrificed everything, who gave them her store, her home, her time, her hands, her heart. But no, they saw none of that. They saw an extra body in the house, a mouth to feed, a presence that reminded them of age and obligation. And so when she finally said it, when she looked me in the eye and told me to take my junk and go, something inside me stopped being quiet. Not angry, not loud, just still. Because silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes silence is planning, and I had been planning longer than they realized. It was a Thursday morning, the kind that starts with sun through the blinds and a list of things to do before lunch. I had walked to the market like I always did, pushing my little cart with the wobbly wheel, the one my grandson once called Grandma's tractor. The strawberries were in season. I had planned to make cobbler, but when I turned onto our street, something shifted in my chest. The house looked different. Still the same roof, still the same white shutters, but the porch was full. Not with people, not with packages, with boxes stacked neatly like donations outside a thrift store. And there on top was my handwriting labels I had carefully written over the years. Winter sweaters, photo albums, kitchen tools, moms, all sitting out in the Texas heat like a garage sale no one had priced. I slowed my steps. Then I stopped completely. I saw my red kettle, the one I had boiled water in every morning for decades. I saw the Afghan I'd crocheted the winter my husband got sick, folded in a cardboard box like a forgotten towel, a stack of old picture frames. Me and my husband, young and laughing at some long-gone barbecue. Our son in a cowboy costume, smiling wide. My life, my memories, my belongings, all placed gently outside. But make no mistake, it was an eviction. I walked up the steps slowly. There was a note taped to one of the boxes, fluttering a little in the wind. Thanks for everything, but we need the space. No signature, no goodbye, just that. I stood there for a long time before the door opened. She walked out like she was stepping into a casual afternoon. No guilt in her eyes, no sadness in her voice. "Well, send your mail," she said, arms crossed. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." Harder for who? I wanted to ask. For you? Behind her, my son stood silent. Taller than me now, broader in the shoulders, but somehow smaller than he used to be. His eyes didn't meet mine. He just stared at the floor like a schoolboy waiting for the principal's scolding. I looked at him. I waited. He didn't say a word. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "Tell her this isn't right. Tell her this isn't how you treat your mother." But I didn't because the silence said enough. I nodded just once, turned back to the boxes. I picked up the one with the sweaters, those I had knit when my fingers were stronger and my winters were colder. I held it close to my chest. No one helped me carry anything. I loaded what I could into a neighbor's borrowed car. The rest I left behind. Some memories are too heavy to lift when your heart has already broken. I stayed that night in a modest room above a florist shop run by a widow named Ruth, who didn't ask questions. She just handed me a cup of warm tea and said, "You can stay as long as you need." That kindness undid me. I cried into her floral couch for 2 hours. That night, I couldn't sleep because on top of everything, there was something else. Something that had gnawed at me for weeks, but I hadn't had the energy to confront. A quiet theft that now screamed in the dark. 3 weeks earlier, I had gone to retrieve my pearl necklace from the back of my closet. It was my wedding gift from my husband. Not expensive by today's standards, but precious beyond price. Each pearl had been hand-picked. I had only worn it 3 times in my life. Once on my wedding day, once on our 25th anniversary, and once at his funeral, but it was gone. At first, I thought I misplaced it. My hands trembled for hours as I tore through every drawer, every pouch, every fold of cloth. I even checked the laundry, hoping I had somehow forgotten I wore it to church. But I knew better. And then came the baby shower. They threw it in the backyard. Balloons, cupcakes, catered food. I stood by the hedge, invisible, holding paper plates. No one asked me to sit. No one handed me cake. That's when I saw her. She was laughing, hand on her belly, talking to her friends. And there, gleaming under the sunlight, was my necklace. The pearls, my pearls around her neck like some heirloom she had earned. Oh, this I heard her say when someone complimented it. My husband gave it to me. Family heirloom, you know. Yes, I knew. I clutched my paper plate so hard it bent in half. In that moment, something snapped. Not like a firecracker, but like an old branch dried out from years of storms. Quiet. Final. They had taken everything. My home, my voice, my name on the mailbox, my chair at the table, my place in the family, and now, even the last piece of love I had kept hidden in a velvet box. That night, I opened my notebook, the one I had kept since 1982. I flipped through the pages, receipts, deposits, copies of mortgage payments I had made when they were behind, notarized documents from the house's first remodel, where my name stood at the top of every page. A letter my husband wrote the year before he died in shaky penmanship. "If anything happens to me, remember Dot built this house. It's hers." I placed it all into a folder. Then I looked at my phone. I hadn't called him in years, but I knew the number by heart. When he answered, I didn't need to explain. "Tom?" I said, my voice steady. It's time. I did not slam the door when I left. I did not scream or curse or leave the stove running just to prove a point. I did not break the dishes I had bought with my own money or tear the family photos from the walls like a storm through the past. I just packed quietly one suitcase, small beige with a tear on the side, that I had stitched with navy thread. Inside, I placed 3 pairs of clothes, a warm cardigan, my reading glasses, my medications, a scarf my late husband had given me on our last trip to Galveston, and the small tin box I had kept hidden in the back of the closet behind the winter blankets. It was the only thing they hadn't touched. That box held what they never understood, what they never thought to ask about, what I had protected, not just from moths and time, but from entitlement. Inside were 2 things. First, a stack of photos bound with twine, yellowed at the edges, some curling from the humidity, but still intact. Our wedding day, 1969. My husband in his only suit. Me in a borrowed dress, smiling like fools who thought love could outlast gravity. Then the birth of our son. Him learning to walk. Christmases, where the tree was small, but the joy was enormous. And somewhere in the middle, photos of the grocery store we built from nothing. I kept them all. The second thing was the red notebook, leather-bound, soft at the corners, from years of turning pages. I had started it when we bought our first house. I wrote in it every month, every transaction, every payment I made, especially after my husband got sick and I took over all the finances. Every check I wrote to fix the roof, every time I paid the property tax when my son forgot, every quote from contractors I hired when the plumbing went out, every loan I co-signed and paid off quietly so my son wouldn't have a foreclosure on his credit, every single detail. And at the very back, folded neatly, was the letter. My husband's handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably his. If anything ever happens, this house is hers. She built it. I just signed the papers. He had written it the year before he passed. Not notarized, not official, but real, honest, the words of a man who knew who held up the roof. I placed that letter on top of the notebook, then I zipped the suitcase shut. They did not ask me where I was going. They did not follow me outside. My son texted me 1 hour later. Just 5 words, let us know you're safe. I did not reply. I walked 5 blocks to Ruth's place, the widow who ran the florist shop near the church. I had once helped her prune roses after a storm, and we had spoken in quiet nods ever since. She had a small room upstairs. She gave me the key and a blanket and a cup of mint tea. That first night, I sat on her balcony and watched the stars blink through city lights, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a dull kind of emptiness, like someone had scooped out everything I had left and replaced it with air. I was weightless and tired, but I was free. The next morning, I placed the notebook, the letter, and a copy of the house deed into a manila folder. I added the photo of my daughter-in-law wearing my stolen necklace, a screenshot of her Instagram where she had captioned it, "Family treasures passed down with love." Love. What a word. I stared at the folder for a while. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like documentation, like I was just finally putting my name back on what had always been mine. I picked up the phone. Tom was my husband's attorney. An old soul with sharp eyes and a long memory. He had helped us with our wills, our insurance, the lease on the grocery store, even my husband's hospice paperwork. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. I expected to get voicemail, but when he answered on the second ring, I heard that same familiar voice. "Dorothy," he said, cautious. "Yes," I replied. My voice was steady, almost too steady. There was a long pause. He knew. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. "Bring me everything," he said. "We'll start today." I took the bus downtown, wore my church shoes, brought the folder on my lap like a sleeping child. At his office, he opened the folder slowly, read everything, took notes. He looked at the photo of my daughter-in-law, at the date-stamped receipts, the years of scribbled figures, the letter from my husband. When he looked up, his expression had changed. "They were smart," he said, "but not smarter than you." I just nodded. He smiled. "You know, you could take them for a lot more than the house." "I do not want more," I said. He tilted his head. "I just want what is mine," I continued, "and I want them to feel what it's like to be forgotten." Tom leaned back, folded his hands over his chest. That he said, "We can do." It would take time. He explained the process. I listened carefully, not out of anxiety, but resolve. There were steps to follow, papers to file, but the foundation was already there, laid by my quiet hands across decades. They just never thought I kept the receipt. As I left his office, I passed a mirror in the hallway. For the first time in months, I looked at myself, really looked. I was still me. Wrinkled, yes, tired, of course, but standing. And standing alone is still standing. I walked back to Ruth's shop, my head high, my pace steady. They had taken my space, my comfort, my name from the mailbox. But they had forgotten something. I was the one who built the house. And no one, no matter how quietly I left, should ever forget the woman who laid the first brick. They thought I was just some old woman with soft hands and tired knees, someone who stirred soup and folded laundry and watched the same soap operas every afternoon. They never knew who I was before I became invisible. I was the first in my family to graduate college back in the 1970s. That meant something. I was the only girl in my class who didn't drop out to marry early. The only one who turned down a ring so I could keep a scholarship. I studied accounting. Numbers made sense when people didn't. That was where I met my husband. He was working nights at a gas station to pay for trade school. He was kind even then, not flashy, not loud, but steady, reliable, the kind of man who held doors open and remembered your father's name after one introduction. We had nothing. Not even a mattress of our own when we first moved in together. Just 2 plates, 2 forks, and a second-hand coffee pot that dripped more than it brewed. But we had plans. We opened the grocery store 2 years after we married. It was a tiny space in East Austin, half-empty shelves, creaky floors, and the kind of cash register that still rang like a bell. I handled the books. He ran the counter. We worked 12-hour days for years. No vacations, no sick days, just work, sweat, faith. We made it through inflation, looting, floods, and power outages. We raised our son behind that counter. He used to sit on the milk crates with a juice box, pretending to tally up prices with a crayon. He used to tell his friends, "My parents own a store. They're important." I guess that changed. When we finally had enough money for a house, it was me who handled the mortgage. I negotiated every term, paid every fee, stood in line at the courthouse to file the paperwork. The deed was in my name for the first 5 years. But one night, after my husband came back from a barbecue with some old friends, he sat on the edge of our bed, quiet. They kept asking who owned the house. He said, "And I asked." He hesitated. It makes me feel small, like I can't even say it's mine. So I transferred the deed. No questions, no bitterness, just a signature. Because love, I thought, meant lifting the person you love, even if it meant lowering yourself a little. He never asked me to, but he didn't stop me either. That was the beginning of me giving away parts of myself and calling it loyalty. After he passed, I found that old copy of the deed still folded in his Bible. My name was faded from the ink, but not from the memory. What my son never knew was that without me, they would not have had a house to live in. That every time they missed a bill, I was the one who caught it before it bounced. That I paid off their credit cards twice silently just to protect his credit score. That when the water heater broke, I called the plumber. When the fridge stopped cooling, I ordered the new one. All under the same roof where they told me to stay quiet. I remember one night during the second trimester of my daughter-in-law's pregnancy, she was complaining about the water pressure in the guest bathroom. I offered a suggestion, just a gentle comment about replacing the old pipe system that I had helped install years ago. My son looked up from his phone, annoyed. "If you wanted to say," he said, "you should have paid for more." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I had paid with every dollar in my savings, with every sleepless night worrying about their bills, with every casserole, every late-night fever check, every time I held my tongue when she mocked my food, my hair, my silence. But to him, that meant nothing. To him, love was only counted when it came with an invoice. I remember sitting on the porch that night after they went to bed. The sky was clear, but the stars looked different, distant, like even they were turning away. I thought of all the women in my family who never got to be old, who never got to tell their stories. My mother, who scrubbed floors until her hands cracked. My aunt, who raised 5 children and was buried in a borrowed dress. I thought I had broken the cycle. I thought building something would protect me. One night, after she mocked my cooking again, I packed a bag, just a small one. I sat on the edge of the bed holding my keys, ready to walk out without a word. But then I heard his footsteps. My grandson padding through the hallway in his pajamas. He knocked once. "Grandma, did you make triangle toast?" he asked. I unpacked the bag that night, Not because they deserved me to stay, but because he did. At least I thought so then. But here I was erased. And the cruelest part, they weren't monsters. They were just indifferent. They didn't hate me. They just didn't think I mattered enough to hate. And in many ways, that hurt more. So I decided to let them keep their version of the story. The one where I was just Ma, a quiet presence in the background. The one who helped out but didn't do much. The one who was lucky to have a room, a roof, a place to stay. Let them believe that because soon the truth would walk through the front door with paperwork in hand. And when it did, they would finally see me not as a burden, but as the builder, as the name they erased from the deed, as the woman who had been silent for far too long. The day they celebrated the coming of new life was the same day I reminded them of who had given them the one they already had. It was a sunny Saturday, the kind where the Texas heat wraps around your shoulders like a warning. They had strung pastel streamers across the backyard fence, lined folding tables with tiny cupcakes and baby blue plates, and taped its boy banners to the patio windows. I watched from across the street behind the tinted window of Tom's car. He had insisted on driving me past the house, not out of cruelty, but closure. "They think it's a beginning," I murmured. Tom nodded. "It is just not the one they expected." At exactly 2:15 p.m., his assistant walked up the front path in a pressed gray suit, holding a thick envelope in one hand and a small box in the other. I watched as she rang the doorbell and waited. It was my daughter-in-law who answered. She was dressed in pink satin and pearls, my pearls, looking every bit the hostess she always wanted to be. She smiled out of habit, not recognition. But the moment the assistant handed her the envelope, her face shifted from confusion to suspicion to fear. She didn't open it right away. She just held it like it might explode. Then the assistant pointed at the box and said something. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew what they were. Inventory, evidence, the law wrapped in manners. Inside that envelope was everything. Almost everything. There was a moment when I asked Tom if I should press charges for the stolen necklace. His response was calm. "You could," he said, "but it would cost time, energy, and your peace. You're already taking back what matters most. Let that be enough." And it was. The notice of asset repossession, a formal eviction signed and sealed by the court, a notarized summary of the house's financial records, proving that the down payment, the remodeling costs, even the property tax for the last 3 years had all come from my account. There was a full-color photo of the pearl necklace with a dated appraisal and a written note from my jeweler, confirming it matched the set purchased under my name in 1970. There were printouts of text messages. Yes, I had taken photos of my son's casual remarks over the years. "Thanks for the help with the water bill, Ma. Don't worry, I'll pay you back. We owe you everything." Everything. That word again. Everything I gave. Everything they took. And now everything they would lose. Tom and I drove away before the first guest even noticed anything was wrong. He didn't ask me how I felt. He knew better. Some silences are sacred. But later that afternoon, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. The first call was from my son. I didn't answer. Then came a text. "Mom, what did you do?" Still, I said nothing. Another call, then another. Then a voicemail from my daughter-in-law's mother, who had never spoken to me unless it involved holiday menus or carpool plans. "You can't be serious with this. During her pregnancy, this is cruelty." Cruelty. No one thought it cruel when they placed my belongings on the porch like trash. No one called it cruel when they locked me out of the family photo album or whispered about freeing up space like I was furniture. No one batted an eye when they took my necklace and called it an heirloom. But now that the consequences had arrived in a manila envelope, they remembered the word. I put the phone on silent. By evening, I received one final message from my son, longer this time. It began with, "I wish you had just talked to me," and ended with, "We didn't mean to hurt you." But intentions don't scrub away impact, and silence is still a choice. He made his day after day, standing behind her with crossed arms and lowered eyes, watching the woman who raised him be erased one subtle insult at a time. I once believed forgiveness had to be offered to everyone, but some apologies come too late to matter. I spent that evening at Ruth's helping her trim sunflowers in the back room of the shop. She didn't ask questions, she just handed me gloves and a pair of shears. It was the first time in months that my hands felt useful for something that didn't end in someone else's thankless belly. Later that night, While sipping chamomile tea in her kitchen, I turned my phone back on and opened the photo Tom had sent me. The pearls were spread across a velvet cloth. A small tag beside them marked recovered, authenticated, returning to rightful owner. I touched the screen gently, not out of vanity, not out of vengeance, but because those pearls represented something they never understood: value, history, ownership. They weren't just stones, they were proof that I had existed, loved, sacrificed, and still had the right to take up space. The next morning, Tom called. "They'll have 30 days, he said. Then it's yours again." "Let them stay the full term," I said calmly. "Let them sit in it a while." "You sure?" "Yes. I want them to look around that house every day and realize it was never theirs to begin with. I want them to wake up and know they celebrated the baby's arrival in a house built on lies." There was a pause. "Dorothy," he said quietly, "you're something else." I smiled. The first real smile in weeks. "I used to be," I said. "Now I'm just remembering." That day I packed a small bag, not with clothes, but with copies. Copies of every document just in case. I placed them in a fireproof lockbox under my bed. Not because I didn't trust the law, but because I had learned never to trust people who say we're family right before they take what's yours. Over the next few days, my phone quieted. No more calls, no more texts, just silence. And that silence, it felt like justice. It was 2 days after the envelope arrived when I heard the knock. 3 sharp taps, firm, then still. I knew it was him before I even opened the door. Mothers know the weight of their children's footsteps, even after they forget how to say your name with love. He was standing there, shoulders hunched in that way he did when he was 8, and had broken the neighbor's window with a baseball. Only this time, there was no bat in his hand, just guilt. Naked and raw, clinging to his face like humidity. "Hi, Ma," he said. I didn't respond. I simply stepped aside and let him in. Ruth wasn't home. The shop was closed for the morning. We had the little apartment to ourselves. He sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I had taught him to count coins from my store's register, the same table where I had cut crusts off his sandwiches, bandaged, scraped knees, and waited up when he missed curfew. He looked older than I remembered. Or maybe I had just stopped looking closely a long time ago. "I know I should have come sooner," he began, eyes fixed on a crack in the tile. "You should have," I replied. He nodded, swallowing hard. "We messed up. We didn't think it would. I didn't think you'd." He stopped. "What?" I asked quietly. "Didn't think I'd fight back." He looked up then, truly looked at me for the first time since they'd set my life out on the porch like forgotten donations. "No," he said. "I didn't think you'd leave." "Not like that. And yet," I said, "here we are." He rubbed his palms together, a nervous tic from childhood. "Look, I know what we did was wrong. Kicking you out the way we did it, it wasn't fair. And the necklace, I didn't know she took it. I swear. But I should have asked. I should have paid attention." Silence settled between us like fog, thick, cold. "I let things happen," he continued. "I thought staying quiet was keeping the peace." I raised my eyebrows. "No, son," I said. "You didn't keep peace. You kept her comfortable. You let her disrespect me under my own roof. You let her erase me piece by piece while you stood there and watched." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left to say. "I cooked for your family. I paid your bills. I gave up my retirement, my business, my name on the house because I believed you were worth it. And when she told me to take my junk and leave, you stood behind her like a child hiding behind his mother's apron." He flinched. "I didn't know what to say," he whispered. "You didn't have to say anything," I said. "You just had to stop her." A long breath passed between us. He dropped his head into his hands. "I'm sorry, Ma." I looked at him. Not the boy I raised, not the man he pretended to be, but someone in between. Lost, small. "You called me family," I said. "But family doesn't make you invisible. Family doesn't throw you away when you've given everything." He wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt. "We want to fix this," he said. "I want you to come back. We'll figure it out. We'll make room." "No," I said, firm, calm. "I don't want a room," I continued. "I want respect. I want memory. And I want my name to mean something in that house again. Not because I paid for it, but because I mattered." He nodded slowly. "You do now?" I corrected. "I matter now because you're afraid of losing everything, not because you remember what I gave." He closed his eyes. Then gently he reached across the table. Not to hold my hand, but to place a folded piece of paper down. It was a drawing, crayon and glitter bent at the corners. My grandson's handwriting scrolled across the top. To Grandma, I miss you. I stared at it, not for sentiment, but for proof. Proof that at least one person in that house had noticed my absence. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I said finally. I'm doing this because I deserve to be seen. Not just remembered when it's convenient. Not just needed when it's helpful. Seen. He nodded again, the tears now fully falling. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking. I know. We sat in silence for a while. He didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. Some wounds aren't stitched with apologies. Eventually, he stood. I'll call Tom, he said. Tell him we're leaving the house by the deadline. Good, I said. He paused at the door. Ma, he said softly. If it matters. I do love you, I nodded. It matters, but it's not enough. He left and I exhaled for the first time in weeks. There were no hugs, no dramatic goodbyes, no swelling music or last-minute revelations. Just truth, cold, clean, final. I did not weep after he left. I did not feel victorious. I did not even feel satisfied. But I felt something better, balanced, like the scales had finally tipped back to where they belonged. It took 31 days for the house to be legally mine again, 32 to list it, 35 to accept an offer, twice the price we paid. That porch, where they left my things like trash, became the front cover of the real estate brochure. Charming remodeled home in the heart of Texas, the agent called it. They never mentioned the hands that paid for every nail, every tile, every drop of sweat in the drywall, but I knew, and that was enough. The buyers were a young couple, newlyweds. She called me, ma'am, and asked if the gardenia bushes would stay. He noticed the little notches on the hallway trim and asked, Were these from your grandkids growing up? I just smiled. Something like that, I said. The day they moved in, I stood across the street with a manila envelope in hand. Not legal papers, not proof of ownership, just a letter folded twice and a little gift bag for the wife. Inside, a dish towel embroidered with Welcome Home, hand-stitched by me 30 years ago. I had intended it for my daughter-in-law. Funny how things change. I didn't linger. I didn't want to haunt the place like a bitter ghost. I had given enough of myself to that house. It was time to begin again. With the proceeds from the sale, I did something no one expected. I invested in the same small grocery chain that had grown from the tiny store my husband and I built decades ago. It had become a franchise now, still family-run, though not by mine. I called the new owner, a young woman named Camille, who had bought the name rights and preserved the recipes. I told her who I was. She gasped, then whispered, You're that Dorothy? I laughed. The one who used to price apples by hand. Yes. We met for coffee the next day. She asked me 1,000 questions. I answered them all. And by the end of the week, I had a seat on her advisory board and shares to my name. Not bad for a woman who was kicked out for needing space, I told Tom over the phone. You're not just getting space, he said. You're taking back legacy. Exactly. I found a penthouse in the city, not huge but bright, a balcony with room for morning tea, and the cactus I had kept alive for years, the one my husband gave me on our anniversary. Like us, he said, tough, quiet, and hard to kill. It had bloomed once. The year after he died, I placed it near the window, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely, just whole. I spent the mornings listening to the city wake up, people rushing below with coffee cups and tangled earbuds. I watched them with quiet amusement, sipping tea from a cup older than some of their shoes. In the afternoons, I walked to the bookstore down the block. The clerk, a boy with chipped nail polish and nervous energy, learned my name by the third visit. Miss Dorothy, the memoir section's over there again, he'd say like it was a secret. I liked him. He reminded me that the world was still young, even if I wasn't. But there was one thing left undone. One small thread that tugged at my heart in the quiet hours just before sleep. My grandson. He had not called, not written. I didn't expect him to. Children learn silence from the grown-ups around them. And if his parents had taught him anything, it was that absence can sound like love when said politely enough. There was one moment I never told anyone about. A Tuesday afternoon, maybe a month before I left, he ran in from school, backpack half open, shoes untied. He looked up, beaming, and yelled, "Grandma!" before correcting himself, "Sorry, I meant Mom." His mother didn't flinch, just kept scrolling, but I felt it like a slap. Even his slip of the tongue had been trained out of him. That was the day I stopped baking his favorite cookies. But I remembered him. I remembered how he used to tug at my apron asking for triangle toast, how he'd sit in my lap, tracing the veins on my hands, whispering, "You're like a me." So I made him something. Not a grand gesture, not a lecture, a photo book. I spent hours printing old pictures, scanning them, choosing the ones where we smiled the most, even if the years after had stolen those smiles. I added captions in my handwriting beneath each one. Your father's first bike ride, the store before the storm, you, age 3, with jelly on your chin. On the last page, I taped a note. Just one sentence. If you ever read this, know that Grandma didn't leave. She just kept living. I wrapped the book in brown paper and tied it with string. I mailed it with no return address, just a sticker that said, "For when you're ready," and I let it go. That was the final gift I gave, not to them, but to myself. The gift of freedom is not just walking away, it's choosing what to carry. And I chose not to carry bitterness. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because I deserved peace more. Some people want closure, others want revenge. Me, I just wanted room to breathe. And now, with my cactus, my city view, my name on a business I helped build, and silence that no longer hurts, I finally had it. Space, mine, earned. The house did not sit empty for long. I could have sold it outright, but I chose not to. There was something poetic about keeping the deed in my name, a quiet kind of justice, inked in patience. Instead, I found tenants, a young couple, no older than my son had been when he first brought his wife home. They were school teachers, modest, kind, and deeply respectful. During the walkthrough, the husband noticed the hooks by the back door and smiled. "Perfect for my mother's gardening hats," he said. I paused. "She lives with you?" I asked gently. "Oh, yes," the wife answered without hesitation. "She's been with us since my father passed. She helps with dinner, takes care of the kids when we're both working. We'd be lost without her." I watched the way they looked at each other, the way they mentioned her like a blessing, not a burden. And right then, I knew the house would be in good hands. I gave them the lease at a fair price. They insisted on paying more. "No," I told them, handing back their check. "Just promise me you'll treat every room like it remembers something, because it does. That living room remembers the sound of a boy playing with wooden trains. That kitchen remembers a mother stirring gumbo while humming to herself long before the smell was mocked. That porch, yes, even the porch remembers the weight of silence. And now it deserved better." I left the key under the mat and walked away. Across town, my son and his wife had moved into a rental, a small duplex near the highway, far from the suburban quiet they used to claim as theirs. I heard from Tom that the landlord was strict, rent was high, and for the first time in their marriage, they were paying every dollar themselves. They had to sell the nursery furniture, couldn't afford a second car. She went back to work 6 weeks postpartum. He picked up weekend shifts at a hardware store. I did not rejoice in their struggle. That was never the point. But I also did not feel sorry. This was not revenge. It was reality unfolded, unfiltered, and finally fair. When you build your life on someone else's sacrifice and call it success, eventually the ground gives way. Not with a bang, but with a soft, steady shift that leaves you wondering where the floor went. I never told anyone about the joy I felt watching that house bloom under new hands, or the way I smiled just a little hearing from the new tenants that their mother-in-law had planted tomatoes in the backyard. "It's her way of saying thank you," they said. I knew that language well. Sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a garden that grows. Sometimes it's just a garden that grows. I never heard from my daughter-in-law again, but my son sent a card on Mother's Day. No signature. Just a photo of my grandson holding up a crayon drawing of what looked like a cactus. I placed it on my fridge, not because I forgave him, but because some parts of us deserve to stay soft, especially when the world tries to make us hard. In my new place, mornings are quiet. I drink my tea. I read the newspaper. I listen to the sound of a city that doesn't know my name, and I love it for that. No one here calls me Ma with contempt. No one sighs when I walk into the room. No one moves my things, borrows my heirlooms, or tells me I'm taking up space. I belong. Not because anyone gave me permission, but because I claimed it. Some nights I sit on the balcony with my cactus blooming beside me and think about everything I used to accept. The insults masked as jokes, the dinners eaten in silence, the invisible labor I offered in exchange for crumbs of kindness. I think of the day they packed my life into boxes and placed them on the porch like I was a package marked "Return to Sender." And I smile because now I know what they never did. I was never disposable. They wanted space, so I gave them emptiness. They wanted freedom, so I gave them mine. They wanted a home without history, a house without memory, a life without me, so I gave them exactly that. And when the final deed was done, when the last check cleared and the porch was swept clean of my past, I did not take the house back. I took something greater. I took back my voice, the one they ignored at the dinner table, the one they talked over in the living room, the one they silenced with convenience until it roared inside of me like a storm waiting for its time. And this time, I did not whisper. This time, I did not wait to be asked. This time, I did not cry behind closed doors or pray for them to understand. This time, I spoke in contracts, in signatures, in silence, in full control of my own ending. No one had to lose for me to win, but they did, because they gambled with something I built from scratch. And they bet on me staying small. They were wrong. So no, I did not get revenge. I got restoration. I got legacy. I got breath. I got peace. And I got a view from the top of the city where no one dares to call me just anything. I am Dorothy, mother, builder, survivor. And if anyone ever asks what became of the woman they put out on the porch with a note and a thank you, tell them she lived louder than ever and she was never quiet again. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a truth, a silence you've carried too long, know this. You are not alone. Some of us were pushed aside, forgotten, or told we were just the mother, the wife, the help. But we remember, and now we speak. This was her true story from Texas. But it echoes in kitchens, porches, and quiet hearts across the country.